Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Oh, a bit closer. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Personally, I find post-lunch sessions the hardest with a full belly to stay awake, so really appreciate you all being here. My name is Kirsten Nelson de Burka. I'm a product policy manager with Mozilla, and I'm here with our wonderful panel to discuss the evolution of pets in digital ads, genuine privacy innovation, or market power play. So first I'm going to introduce our panelists to you all, and then after that I'm going to, set the scene a bit before we dive into a panel discussion with our wonderful experts. So first, to my left, we have Graham Mudd. Graham is our SVP of product for Anonym at Mozilla. Anonym was acquired by Mozilla a year ago, and they focus on privacy-preserving technologies, predominantly surrounding measurement, and there's also been another recent announcement with regards to audiences. Next to Graham, sorry, I'm double-checking what order we're in, we have Vincenzo Tiani of the Future of Privacy Forum. Vincenzo is an EU Senior Policy Counsel at the FPF, based here in Brussels, where he primarily focuses on the intersection of data privacy and AI. Actually, you're all in order, I think. Wow, that's cool. Next to Vincenzo, we have Arleta Goreca of the Glasgow International College. Arleta is currently acting as a law lecturer at the Glasgow International College. She's a legal scholar specializing in EU competition law, privacy, and data protection. And she has a PhD exploring the their interplay, in the digital economy. And last but not least, we have Aymeric Pontviana, Chief Economist at CNIL. Aymeric is the head of the Economic Analysis Team at CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, and the co-coordinator of the EDPB task force on the interplay between data protection, competition, and consumer protection. I'm going to first set the scene, as I mentioned. So one of the nice things is I've already even heard some wonderful broader colleagues within this space speak about even the topic of pets today. So I assume a lot of you were at the earlier panel, so I think it's a really nice opportunity to also just think about the things that were said earlier and my personal reflections on those. So I think, in general, there's a huge significance with regards to the dynamic shift and direction focus on how we stimulate the economy more broadly within the European Union. And even in recent days, Commissioner McGrath actually has visited, for example, the European Association of Communications Agencies, so really showing this emphasis on advertising as a topic. And from there, I think what we ultimately are all here to think about and discuss when we look at this specific topic is, how do we go about achieving the balance between technology being sufficiently simple for citizens and comprehensive when it comes to, this complex area of advertising, and balancing that simplicity against the fact that there is also an obligation to educate citizens on those technological advancements. And now I've really distilled what I've heard and what I've read about more broadly in this space to it's an oversimplified sentence, but that's why we have these experts here to actually speak more broadly to the technologies of this, the academic reasoning, what regulators think, and just more broadly what legal experts think in this space. So with that, I'm going to steer to asking a question of one of our esteemed panelists. So Dr. Goreca, if I may start with you. I'd love to ask, how do you see privacy regulations like the GDPR influencing competition dynamics in digital markets? And to add a layer to that question, if I may, are they inadvertently, raising barriers to entry for smaller players?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for asking me the question, and it's wonderful to see you all here. So to answer this question, I'm going to actually speak about a few effects, and then we will divide it into pro-competitive sides and anti-competitive sides. And then we'll briefly touch upon what is the issue for small entry players. So when we talk about the burdens which we have between GDPR and obviously competition and that dynamic, one of the key things is compliance burden, which I assume is mostly being an either non-competitive side or anti-competitive side, because we do know that introduction of GDPR is actually raising very high costs for orientation. It doesn't really matter if we talk about just implementing GDPR, but also operating GDPR in a wider sphere. And the other aspect is obviously access to data and the usage of data, which would introduce two sides way. So when we dwell upon pro-competitive sides, we can say that obviously with principles such as data portability or data interoperability, and also cost of switching, we can potentially see some of the pro-competitive sides. Nevertheless, there's also another side of the coin, which is anti-competitive sides. And here we can see that big players will still retain more data. They will presumably have more access to the data, and they'll have more resources to analyze this data. Another component will be privacy as differentiation, and here we can again double two ways, because obviously when we do introduce pet, for example, we can see a potential way in increasing privacy, but also we do know from the experience that privacy has been an issue in competition law. Everybody knows the famous Facebook case, which has taken a long while to regulate. So we can see that actually is an issue, which then goes hand in hand with the user trust. And you can see that sometimes we can build a consensus, which people will be joining platforms, but obviously what we know from the Facebook case, through the way of unfair trading conditions, we do have the notion of anti-competitiveness here. And lastly, we do have regulatory uncertainty because, for example, GDPR has been criticized before, and one of the papers is calling it a Google Data Protection Directive, saying that, again, platforms like directives like GDPR is really focused onto big market players. And to really follow quickly, sorry for this, we can potentially see that for small undertakings, it's a very costly way to implement GDPR in a practical way.
Thank you so much, and I think that's really putting the nail on the head with regards to cost being such a big factor for new market entrants. And I think that also leads really nicely to actually asking Graham a question. So, yeah, I guess with regards to Anonym and Anonym's focus on privacy-preserving ad solutions, what do you find are the biggest adoption hurdles you're facing when introducing pets to mainstream advertisers and publishers?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Graham Mudd. I was one of the founders of Anonym, which, as Kirsten mentioned, was acquired by Mozilla about a year ago. And prior to that, I spent a lot of time in the ad space, so this is a conversation near and dear to my heart. So I think in terms of barriers for adoption of PETs, I think the single greatest one is either a lack of awareness of what's possible with PETs as it relates to ads, or maybe if they are aware, a misconception that if you implement privacy-preserving approaches, by definition, you are making ads less powerful, less measurable, and so forth. And I don't want to pretend for an instant that you can do everything you can in an invasive state, but do it just as well in a privacy-preserving state. There are some capabilities, for instance, retargeting, that are fairly challenging to do in a privacy-preserving way. And my personal opinion is those types of practices probably just need to end. But there is a lot that can be done really effectively and at very little, sort of cost to the effectiveness of ads. I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but measurement is a good example. Measuring whether ads work or not. Measurement is an exercise in aggregate insights, so you don't need to give away user-level data in order to do it if you do it the right way. And then I think the other, major challenge for adoption is just the lack of incentives. And I think, of course, there's the stick that we would like to see of regulation, sort of pushing the industry in the right direction. And so we'd certainly like to see, privacy regulation, federal privacy regulation in the U.S. and, stronger privacy regulations globally. and encouragement to use privacy-enhancing technologies as a sort of a way through the challenge. The carrot, I think, is to make it clear, to ad platforms and to advertisers that by leveraging these technologies, they are at a reduced risk, or they're going to become more competitive over time, and so forth. And I think we need a mix of sort of the stick and the carrot. And so that incentive challenge is a really big deal for the adoption of PETs.
I really like that, and I think, the stick and the carrot, compelling versus incentivizing, that's the biggest balance that we generally see as being required within, how should the market actually operate. And I think this leads very nicely to me calling upon Vincenzo next. So with regards to how do you see how regulators should strike a balance between the incentivization of the use of pets and preventing their misuse as tools for maintaining market dominance?
Thanks for the easy question. I know that all regulators are here to hear my suggestions. So for sure, we need more guidance from regulators. So I'm sorry for the regulators in the room, but some work is needed there, because it's true that that pets are well known, but there is, let's say. And it's also a moment in the actually, since GDPR, where I would say companies are looking for more and more guidance, because GDPR is, let's say, I love GDPR, I'm a GDPR fan, but it's true. So the pros and cons of GDPR is that it's horizontal, it's based on principles, but of course, if you don't want to do the accountability work, you just want a checklist to, just tell me what to do. It's like when you're a kid, say, Mom, Dad, tell me what to do, I will do it. Don't let me think about it. So it's true that even with enhancing, accountability, enhancing data protection by design, by default, pets is a tool for data transfers as well. But there is no, since it's not something that you can, go to the market shop and buy. It requires R&D. It requires to invest in pets, and not all SMEs are not always on the forefront on the research and implementing pets. So if it's true that, of course, big companies like Mozilla, Google, Apple, Meta, and so on can address this kind of can experiment also different kind of pets, but it's not the case for SME, as was also mentioned. So first of all, yes, guidance, and guidance means also that, let's say, more. We know that the DPB, but also each DPA provides guidance on several issues, and let's say giving the input that if you I need to be realistic. Of course, DPA cannot say, okay, if you implement this pet and this pet, you are safe. Mm-hmm. This will never happen. I'm sorry. But perhaps, yes, giving more details and more indications, and not just general ones, will help on this regard. Going back to the competition part, it's true that perhaps it was already the case for the. I'm sorry, my German is horrible. The Bundestella case. Bundestella, you would say the Meta case. Yeah. Anyway, the Meta case. Meta case is easier. Has already said that, meaning data protection authorities and antitrust authorities need to work together. It was already, I think it was also mentioned in the CNIL case, in antitrust, French antitrust against Apple case. So it's required for sure more collaboration and cooperation. A question that I always pose to the AI office or person in the Commission, the AI, say, how are you going to handle all these different authorities? And this is already a thing that in privacy we've seen. Antitrust and antitrust authority and DPAs are always need to work together, because as we've seen, for example, recently in the Apple case, you move, or in the Google case, in the Google for the decision to implement a cookieless browser. If you move too much towards a direction, so enhancing privacy, then if you're a big player, you move too far from competition. And again, even for, I mean, consumer, it's not aware so much, but for companies, it's not easy to understand where they should stop, because really, so again, more guidance.
No, but I really appreciate that, and even during one of the earlier panels in the wrap-up, there was this discussion surrounding legal certainty. What's the threshold for legal certainty? Should that be defined? And it was interesting because I think the main point that was made there, and I think the biggest thing is to understand when you're on the right path, especially if you're a new market entrant. And I think, if I may, ask Aymeric the next question, which follows on really nicely from this. With regards to Keneal, how do you view the current and alternative business models in digital advertising in light of both privacy risks and market concentration concerns, as well as everything that's been spoken to here? Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me here, and thank you for the question. A rather forward-looking question, but not that much actually. Last year at the French data protection authorities, we had a study made by two economists on the future of the ad tech ecosystem, basically based on the novelty of the Google Privacy Sandbox and how the ecosystem would work if the Google Privacy Sandbox was to be deployed. And the economist made an economic and competitive study on what would happen then with several scenarios, and the conclusions were that as far as the competitive effects are concerned, there would be clearly more new entrants. That other business models were possible. The business model, the new business models complementing the older ones were not that much privacy preserving. They were based on tracing as well, so it seems that for the ad tech world, the tracing is a necessity, and we are conscious of that. Maybe we had false hopes on that, but we had to take into account of this. One of the lessons was that the open web would not be erased from the landscape or completely die. It would still work based on the Google Privacy Sandbox solution and the open web website data. And finally, the researchers saw the rise of the actors of the retail media, what we call the retail media, which is of course well known in the industry. And this the action of retail media competitors was probably the most serious competition to the current duopoly in this world. As well based on tracing, so this was clearly a point of vigilance for us. As a conclusion, I would say from this study, because we are in my economic team want to of course to have be mindful of competitive effects as well. We can come back to this after. We noticed that pets doesn't equal removal of barriers to entry by small innovative players against dominance of big actors. Because often you see pets are used by big actors themselves in order to change the market at their profit and have an ecosystemic change of the market. So as regards, it's certainly a favor of innovation, but in terms of competition, it's not necessarily always a pro-competitive tool. Well, for it's the right one because it's pro-privacy, but its competitive effects have it's not the silver bullet in terms of competition.
Thank you so much, and really appreciated also getting the chance to read, albeit a translated version of the study, as I'm not a French speaker. Thank you so much for that. I guess that actually leads nicely into then possibly just thinking a little bit more about the tools that are already accessible to the likes of regulators in the market. I would actually point back to Arletta. So I guess in terms of your body of work in general, I think it would be good to ask you whether you think that stronger enforcement of data access and portability rights under the GDPR could serve as a tool to foster competition in the ad tech market.
Thank you very much for this question. This is actually one of the greatest questions you can ask, because now OECD offered this big report. And within this report, you can actually see how they view data portability and data interoperability together hand in hand, as obviously either supporting privacy, not, but obviously like we do know, especially from digitalization, nothing is straightforward. We always will have like, oh, that is great, everybody loves it. But suddenly back behind it, you have a monster that shows basically what it is and how it works in the practice. So when we do talk about the data portability, in the beginning, it's great. Because obviously we know that under GDPR, you can take your data away from the platform and everybody's happy, like you get your data fun. This is basically what happened to me when I was actually working on my PhD. I remember that I found it as one of the pro-competitive and pro-privacy thing in the beginning. But then the more you delve into it, there is an issue, especially on the horizontal side. So obviously, most of us are using social media platforms. So when you, for instance, use Facebook and suddenly you pull up your data, I actually saw this as one single unit of data that has been already analyzed. It has been already revenued. So you just get your data back. But, and that's it. So this is basically the shadow of it. And also when you look for how the platform is actually working, and you obviously have big companies and you have small and medium enterprises, I also see this, and I've actually started seeing it now as also a threat for it, because then we get back to what we know about the GDPR. And GDPR is great, like I've not criticizing it, I'm trying to stand in the middle and saying this is how it works in practice. But one of the issues is that through this horizontal way, we still can possibly exclude small undertakings for it. And that could potentially happen through lack of compliance costs, because obviously implementation of GDPR could be lengthy. And for the data interoperability, I think this is a good incentive, because we obviously then can introduce easily sandbox initiatives, because you will take data, people will be able to access it, companies will be able to access it, and work on it, both interfaces for this. However, if you get the permission to access those sort of data on the real time, this is where the danger begins, because we don't really know to what extent they can be anonymized and what kind of data it is. So I believe that one of the PET initiatives could actually work well to protect that. This is just the raw data, play with it, but you don't really need to know more of the specific easy to personalize features of that. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think in terms of like where we go from there, I think it's a good opportunity to also ask Graham another question. So I guess as well, like with regards to pets, do they create new dependencies as well then on large platforms that can operate these complex systems at scale? And I guess the more specific question is, how can smaller players participate in a meaningful way?
Yeah. It's a good question, and I think this is still an emerging technology, and therefore, like it's probably more complex than it should be in the long run, and it will become simpler over time as companies innovate. I think it's absolutely the case that the largest platforms are the largest investors in privacy-enhancing technologies, and that they are mostly sort of inside of their own walled gardens and so forth, and that they have a real advantage because they have the engineering talent and the resources to invest in those types of things, whereas a smaller publisher won't. I think from my perspective, and admittedly this is a biased perspective, I think what we need are privacy-enhancing technologies that are developed and operated by independent companies. There needs to be a business in privacy-enhancing technologies. That's our business. And we're not owned by a big ad platform. And we can find ways to innovate and make our solution easy to use by SMEs. If the SMEs have to develop that technology themselves, we don't stand a chance. So we need, we want to see a lot of competitors to us, and we want to, drive the price down of these types of technologies so that, smaller firms can use them, and we have the right incentives to make it easy to use. The way our technology works, just as an example of this, is the heavy lift for us and for integration is with the big ad platforms. So, I'll just use one of our public customers, TikTok. It took a long time to integrate with TikTok to get that set up. But now that we're set up with them, measuring ads on TikTok, if you're a small business, is actually very straightforward. It's not hard at all for them to adopt it. And so I think that's a very healthy property for, frankly, the heavy lift to be with the largest players because they have the resources to actually implement, and for the easier part of the work to be with the smaller enterprises out there. So bottom line, yes, these are sort of new technologies, and we need more companies innovating in this space. But I see a lot of hope for these technologies being accessible to smaller players in the market, as long as there's a business in it for companies like mine to, innovate and build products that are, easy to use.
Thanks so much for that. And I think that also plays into some of the things that were previously discussed with regards to not only cost, but I also think if you're being realistic about a market entrant, even like Anonym, you're not just operating within one space, meaning geographically or product-wise. And I think, that also even applies to the nature of even the advertisers that would then use, for example, the measurement technology to measure the efficacy of their advertising. And with that, I think I'd like to point back to Vincenzo, if I may, because I think one of the factors that then does play in is, whether there is a risk that emerging regulatory requirements, for example, related to either the likes of data localization or sector-specific transparency rules, do you think that those could conflict with PETS-enabled cross-border data collaboration?
Yes, and also it depends we are not talking about only the law, but also the geopolitical situation. Mm-hmm. Because let's say we have seen recently that sometimes even if you comply with the law, the law sometimes is not what. I don't want to be too political, but there is. So PETS can help, of course, in complying with the law, in preserving a lawful data protection transfer. Then, of course, there could be some unexpected, let's say, response from certain countries, because in any case, certain countries want to have access to the data. And so this is not ideal, but again, some guidance from the regulator could help. For example, in a possible update of SEC, there could be more guidance on PETS. Mm-hmm. I would like also to going back to follow up on what was said before about portability. Sometimes we forget that we have other regulations like Data Act and Data Governance Act that actually are trying to push the necessity for portability and in order to foster competition. And I would say, I don't know how many panels are on that Act and Data Governance Act in CPDP, perhaps it's plenty, hopefully. But again, it's something that is not too much seen by SMEs, and that would really help them to, in order to get access to those data that are necessary for their business. Also, I would say that in order to foster competition and combining in a way GDPR and DMAs, again, perhaps a step farther could be done by big players, by gatekeepers, according to DMA, meaning sharing some, since they are the one that can innovate more, can put more resources on research, they could, for example, sharing some of this study in an open standard in order to allow SMEs to join them. And also from the regulator standpoint, it would be needed to incentivize the use of pets, perhaps like with this is more for policymakers, but with a more economic incentive to adopt pets.
Thank you so much. I think that ties nicely to Aymeric, to speak to you, I guess, on the piece of whether there are specific areas where CNIL believes further regulatory clarity is needed to help market actors cope with privacy obligations in this changing ad tech landscape. Thank you.
The answer is certainly yes, and I can explain on which main ones. Because GDPR-based, principle-based regulation, it needs implementation guidelines and more granularity when it comes to sectoral approaches, for example. So, of course, regulatory clarity is very important, and that's what we do by providing at DPA level, national level, by providing guidance to some particular sectors or recommendations. For the ad tech, I would say the first one which comes to mind is exemptions of e-privacy provisions on, for example, on measurement, which are to the EU legislator to deal with, actually, because as authorities we are we can't do anything but implement the current framework, and if the law has to be changed, it's of course the responsibility of the legislators. So this is a first one. A second one, and probably a more which is more doable in the current agenda, is on the consent or pay business models. So I can take this example to explain a bit what we do when it comes to implementing or explaining how we want to implement the Bundeskartellamt Meta versus Meta case from the CGEU 2 years ago. You remember that the CGEU said that the Meta consent or pay business model was likely to be well, it could be lawful under GDPR if it doesn't distort consent, which means that the price paid that people have to pay in order to have the no ad option is appropriate, and that an alternative, equivalent alternative is provided by the what we call the controller, so the Meta, so the entity. So it is for this it's to the data protection authorities to assess all these criteria. What is an equivalent? What is an equivalent option? What is the appropriate price, etc. And for the here there is an interesting debate on how to appreciate how to assess what is an appropriate price. Appropriate fee, the court says. So we have actually we are developing an approach where based on economic thinking and economic theory, there are several criteria if you want to assess the appropriateness of the price, but at CNIL the one we like is the willingness to pay, because it relates to the preference of the individual, and it doesn't relate to a market reality, which has nothing to do with the reality of consent of the individual. And we, as regards the attitude of the regulator, if you want, we don't want to prescribe a price, but we the assessment of the appropriateness of the price is to the controller, is to Meta or to the entities developing those business models, and as authorities, we just want to assess that the price is not too high, based on metrics I explained, but we don't prescribe as such prices or business models. And we don't need as well cooperation with the competition authorities to do this assessment, because it's purely economic. It's not a competitive assessment as such. So I can come back after on our work with the competition authorities, but on this topic, concept of a business model, we don't need them, or they don't, and actually they don't want to work on it. It's a GDPR assessment of liberty of consent. This example illustrates as well what you said on your Vincenzo, on calling to more guidance from data protection authorities and more guidance for pets. And the example shows it's not obvious, because in our guidelines, in our EDPB guidelines on the consent to pay business models, we already, on our opinion, we already stressed the role of the possible alternative, which we call the third alternative, based on low or not at all use of personal data, which could be considered as a consentless alternative, possibly. And this is not obvious, because there is clearly an incentive on this, which is that the legal basis under GDPR could be something else than consent. But the question is are the technical solutions ready, and are they implementable, and are they is return on investment on the market sufficient? And so it's a big question mark. So in a way, the regulators or the opinion says there is an incentive. You can say there is an incentive to go through this kind of, we can call it a PET. It's the third option, based on a less intrusive or less personal data using solution. But then you incur the criticism that it's not technically ready, that it doesn't fit all use cases, that it's not, it doesn't work for retargeting, or it's only a partial solution, etc. So it's a bit like the chicken or the egg problem. You can give incentives, but if the egg is not yet a chicken, it's difficult to to have it working well as a full alternative to current data using solutions. So this is a bit where we all are, I think.
I appreciate that, and now I have a lot of analogies that I could refer to later on with carrots and sticks and eggs and chickens. So that's good to know.
We're talking about pets, so
Exactly. Yeah, I guess from there, and you kind of already touched upon this, although I'm going to point the question to Arletta. I guess what type of role, or do you see a role, maybe I should ask it in this kind of open way, do you see a role, Arletta, for competition authorities in directly addressing the privacy harms of market concentration, or should this remain with the purview of data protection authorities?
I actually got one answer to this. I think yes, and the answer is pretty simple, on the basis that if you look what will happen, like you can basically structure the approach of any competition authorities and data protection together as a way of like them saying no, they are two separate spheres, they won't intervene together, to somehow then accepting this, especially if you look through all merger cases like Facebook and WhatsApp or Microsoft and LinkedIn, when we do have privacy as a quality being for the first time recognized, to then obviously the Facebook saga, when we, I think this is the easiest way to refer it as a Facebook saga, because it started in Germany and then it stepped up to the Court of Justice, when you get the decision that obviously to a certain extent data protection is a part of competition. And even though I've heard several times proponents saying that competition law is very economized, we should only consider the numbers. I would say that the approach to competition law has been really evolving in a way of expanding, even if there will be a counter-argument saying that obviously privacy is a separate thing. I do understand that it's a separate thing, but not really, because I feel that when we do talk about the privacy here, it's like a trap, it's like a circle. If you approach it from the pet side, you also find like legal gaps in, let's say, DMA, and I've got example for you. For instance, when we try to impose, let's say, federated learning, even though GDPR will accept it, and sensu stricto DMA would also look at it, especially Article 6 on data access and interoperability. To be fair, in practice, we do not have a mandate to ensure an equal access to it. So again, and especially when we do talk about smaller undertakings, there is potential issues. And also a final thing, if we even look at differential privacy as one of the pets, again, GDPR will be pro it, data protection by design, and also TFEU will say Article 102 is about preventing unfair advantages. But again, we don't have DMA supports to actually support this kind of instances. So I do feel that there is a place for privacy and competition law sphere.
Thanks so much, and I think to take like a different approach to this topic and think about market entrance, so I'm going to point this question to Graham. I guess if we're trying to look forward and think about the future of interoperability across pet solutions, because I mean, that's what ultimately will lead to there being more, one of the factors that will lead to there being more equal access. Like how do you see that future? And I guess related to that, do you believe an open source approach is viable in this space?
Yeah, I think it's part of the solution. I guess I believe that, and it's already the case, that there are a lot of open source, you might call them like technical primitives. Arletta mentioned differential privacy. It's a big part of our solution. There's lots of open differential privacy, sort of libraries out there that can be used and adapted in, various ad products. One of our, lead researchers is the CTO of OpenDP, a project out of Harvard that, makes those kind of libraries available. And so I think, as primitives, absolutely open source can help. As full end-to-end solutions to like advertising use cases like measurement or attribution, I've yet to see that type of development, become open source. Certainly not opposed to it, but it hasn't happened yet. I do think that commercial incentives here are actually quite important. In other words, if you want to have an ecosystem of companies building privacy technologies, then they need to have then there should be a profit incentive to encourage that. And so I think they're both part of the solution, open source and more commercial models. And I guess the other thing I would mention is one of the other benefits of both open source and a commercially viable sort of ecosystem around privacy technologies is then there's really an incentive for them to be operated independently as opposed to owned by the major ad platforms. And I think, unfortunately, if my industry, if we look at it honestly, we can say that the reason we're in the situation that ads is in is because we have failed at self-regulation. And so I think saying that big ad tech companies are going to build and operate PETs and use them responsibly and you can just trust them, I don't think that's realistic. The incentives for gathering and using data aggressively are too darn strong. It's too competitively advantageous to acquire and use data aggressively. So I think we need independent solutions and for them to be operated independently with oversight and with regulations supporting them and so forth if we want to move this industry in the right direction.
Thanks, and that really feeds into, I think, the broader conversations and even some of the points that actually Vincenzo already touched upon. So I think with that, what I would then ask Vincenzo is with regards to just generally further development and deployment of pets within the industry, I guess, yeah, how can we ensure that that remains aligned with the principle of data minimization under the GDPR?
Sure. So let's say it will help for sure that pets are included, let's say, by quote unquote by default in data protection impact assessment. Meaning if you want to show accountability for certain uses of, for certain processing of personal data, having, let's say, a separate, an opposite part on DPIA saying, okay, I tried with these several pets to address the issue that for sure will help. Also, from the technical standpoint, it could help to demonstrate the mathematical data reduction, not just, let's say, the intention we used pets, it went well. No, how it went well. What is the actual reduction? And then it could, but this is not up to, let's say, up to companies alone. I would say creating, but for associations, trade association, creating a sort of pet certification scheme, again, like we have for ISO standards and so on. We have seen with the AI Act, every time that you can adhere to a standard, it shows your compliance. It shows that you try to do, let's say, your best on data minimization, and that for sure would help.
Well, thanks so much. That definitely really makes a lot of sense. I think maybe it's good to ask one more question for Aymeric, and then we'll allow the audience to ask questions and answers. I didn't announce at the beginning that you would have that opportunity, but I hope you all already knew this. So I guess for a last question for Aymeric to try and tie things together, no pressure. How do authorities such as CNIL delineate the roles of regulation on the one hand and the behaviour of big players on the other as far as market effects are concerned?
It's not an obvious one from an intellectual point of view and from a public communication point of view as well. When we are starting from in Europe. We are starting from a structure where you have data protection authorities and competition authorities, and we have them cooperate. So it's complicated to merge completely the two both policy objectives as you try to make the case of. If we would do that, we would have certainly market resistance from the industry to do it. So we are trying to play with the current legislative framework and work together. For example, between CNIL and the French Autorité de la Concurrence. I can say it in French. We are for long years we are now cooperating on cases, but as well on the concepts, cooperating on concept, and we have a joint declaration governing our work, our common work. Lastly, we have cooperated on 2 points. The first one is on mobile apps, because CNIL issued a recommendation on movement of data in the mobile app. In the mobile apps ecosystems, and we got the opinion of the Autorité de la Concurrence, and we respected it. We put them, we changed our recommendation with lots of their input and feedback. And the second one, it was on the Apple ATT case. The Apple ATT case, which was submitted to the Autorité de la Concurrence, and they requested an opinion from CNIL, the other way around. And on this type of cases, you can as a regulator, you have to try to make a difference between the effects of regulation and the effects of regulation, and what is compliance to regulations, and what is on top of compliance, what is for example, in the Apple ATT case, what is a privacy-preserving practice or a privacy-preserving business model which goes further than mere compliance. It's complicated because some say when it's on top of compliance, it's privacy washing, and it has anti-competitive effects, which sometimes is true. So the authorities have to understand if it's privacy washing or if it has a genuine value added in terms of privacy. So we try to make this assessment. For example, when you seek the consent of the user, if you do it the right way, it's compatible with the good functioning of the attack ecosystem. If you don't do it the right way, it is probably created to have ecosystemic effects alien to privacy. I will say it like that. So there is a question. I don't say we have an answer or that we need to answer it for now, but there is a question, and we take this into account. On the other side, the competition authorities, they recognize, they acknowledge the objective of a privacy-preserving business model. The authority de la concurrence said it in their Apple ATT case. They acknowledge the right for a business to lead a privacy-oriented or more privacy-oriented business model than other players of the market, because it has its virtues in terms of privacy, etc. So and in terms of this means as well, I can conclude by that the privacy objectives for the regulators, yes, they are legitimate. Privacy washing, there's a question mark, but if you want to be fair with all this, when it comes to cooperation between data protection authorities and competition authorities, there are market effects for which the regulation and the regulators are responsible, because it's costly, because it's constraining, etc. And there are other effects, and for which the behavior of big players are responsible and not the regulators. I mean, for the phasing out of third-party cookies, for example, if you look at that, if one day it happens, or if it had to happen one day, it would be the product of the behavior of the players in the ad tech ecosystem, and not of regulatory authorities, because our requirements apply across the board, and the effects, for example, at CNIL, we made evaluations of the effect on our guidance on cookies on the French market, and it was clearly of second scale as compared to, for example, the market preparing to the phasing out of third-party cookies if Google was to do it. So clearly it's as well something we, in terms of impact, we communicate a lot on, because yes, there are costs and there are constraints, but we have to be aware that it can be as well an industrial strategy. It's not only regulation. Sometimes regulation is a pretext to other realities, and we all have to be aware of this.
Thank you so much. I actually think that's a fantastic tone to wrap up this steered discussion on, and I guess to just add a few notes from even my general thinkings before we pass to the audience. I think even speaking, funnily enough, about interoperability of solutions related to pets, and then thinking about the interconnectedness of various regulators and how they have to deal with these landscapes. Not only do we have to create cost effectiveness for new market entrants, it also has to, in a similar sense, be somewhat cost effective for regulators to be able to approach these really difficult topics with the resources that are had. So I'm going to invite anyone who wishes to ask a question from the audience. Thank you for provision of the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this discussion. My name is Erik Valgaard. I'm a data practitioner, lawyer here in Brussels. You've mentioned a lot the role of the companies, the business, the regulators. My question is, what is the role of the data subject and the relevance of the behavior of data subjects in this, and to what extent can their relevance be increased in the way pets become a norm, a standard? You spoke about quality, privacy as a quality. I think, Vincenzo, you talked about standards, labels. Are data subjects sufficiently informed? Are they sufficiently brought in the equation and made relevant? Is there a way of making them more relevant in order to reach what could be a goal like having genuine interest in pets because of the way the demand side in the market would appreciate it? I just have a few questions around the role of the data subjects or the potential role in all of this.
I can maybe start. I would like nothing more, frankly, than for there to be a groundswell of consumers who were interested in demanding more private approaches to all things internet. I think, unfortunately, we've done a bit of a disservice in destroying a lot of trust with consumers, and I think in a lot of cases, the research would demonstrate that they've kind of thrown their hands up. They've said either this is, all of these consent banners, and I just want to get what I wanted to get done, or they're just assuming that everybody has all the data and it's going everywhere and there's nothing they can do about it and it's too opaque. So I think we're in a bit of a quandary in terms of, sort of rebuilding that trust with consumers. My personal belief is that the first step in rebuilding that trust so that they begin to, care enough to make decisions based on their privacy is to raise the bar for everybody. I think when we put the work in the hands of the consumer to try to figure out what a privacy-enhancing technology is or whether I should consent to this use or that use and so forth, I think we've already lost them. And I think the best thing that we can do is try to raise the bar in terms of the practices in my industry, in the ads industry, across the board, and hope that we can rebuild trust that their data is used responsibly so that they then actually believe that they have some agency. But I think we have to rebuild the trust first.
Just, if Technique wants to say something,
No, I was nodding.
No, of course, data subject don't know anything. Still, for the average person, GDPR is the cookie banner, which, if you know privacy, cookie banner is another directive. So, and again, I want to, if you think about that act gives the data subject lots of rights. So you buy a certain, let's say, a certain device. You can say, no, I don't like this fridge. I want to buy a new fridge. I want to transfer the data to the new fridge. This is up to the data subject to make that request. Mm-hmm. If the data subject doesn't know that he can do it, he will stick to the original fridge. Yeah, I don't know how many people have a smart fridge. I don't, but that's fine. So this is one thing, and I can tell you because I know people that work in DigiConnect in the communication department. It is so hard to deliver all the messages that needs to be delivered to the general audience because there is so much complexity. And these things are not seen as urgent. Also, Brussels is seen as boring. So if you mix the two, it's very complex. On the other side, I would say that's something that someone, I think at Meta several years ago, told me that the fact is that for their experience, the user, when we are talking about, let's say, cybersecurity, they are more attentive. Mm-hmm. They receive more the message because, okay, I'm safe. I don't have viruses, I don't have spams, and so on. But if the same principles, if you say privacy, privacy, yeah, you already have all my data. And then, of course, we live in Europe, where all these data are granted, all these rights are granted since not just GDPR, but Directive 1995. And then you realize that this thing is different when you leave the European Union and say, no, now I live in another country, and now before I received 10 emails of spam, now I receive 100 emails of spam every day. So again, it's not easy because it's, in a way, it's already given for granted. I would say that it would. So I wouldn't, just to finish, I wouldn't put this burden on the data subject. I would put this burden on the regulator. I'm Italian. For example, the Data Protection Authority in Italy, the Garante, has created this privacy tour with actually a camper, so a truck. They go around Italy they go to schools and so on in order to raise the awareness about data protection, which is part actually of their job according to GDPR. So yeah, it's up to us also, to all of you. Go home and spread the news.
Oh, thanks so much. And that's even what I tried to convey, like in the intro I gave. I think it's very hard sometimes to even imagine I can't imagine if I were less informed how I would feel about trying to self-educate on these topics as a data subject. Also a nod to the fact we actually do have an Italian DPA team member in the room, so I'm like, that's good that complimenting their work while they're here, and it is fantastic. I feel there was another, there were a few other I think this man might have been, there's a few hands. I don't really mind what order we go in, but yeah, thanks.
Thanks. I'm Stuart Dresner from Privacy Laws and Business. I have a question for Graham. So how you're integrating your pet software with TikTok, and you're providing some metrics. So are you working with other companies? Which companies? How do you communicate the pet's metrics to consumers? That's the sort of questions I have. And a statement regarding the CNIL's policy on the mobile app recommendation at our conference, the good, the bad, and the good enough in Cambridge in the 7th to 9th of July. We have CNIL Commissioner Bertrand Dumaret speaking about the CNIL recommendation on mobile apps. There's a whole session on that subject. Thank you.
So this is advertisement during a pet's.
I love it.
Pet's panel.
Do you have a pet as well? You should talk about them.
It can work.
Right. Sure. A quick minute on how it works. So we use two primary privacy-enhancing technologies: trusted execution environments and differential privacy. And the way that our solution works is impression data from a given ad platform. I used the example of TikTok earlier. Moves encrypted into our trusted execution environment, as does conversion data, or who buys what, from, let's say, Nike, the advertiser, the shoe advertiser. That data also is encrypted. It moves into our trusted execution environment. We are able to decrypt it in the encrypted memory of the environment if we have the permission of the data contributors through a process called attestation. If we do that, then we match the data together, and we do things like attribution or lift measurement, or we can build a lookalike model to find more people who might buy runners from Nike, et cetera. And then we send aggregated and differentially private results to both the ad platform and the advertiser in the form of reporting. And then we destroy the underlying data. So we don't hold on to user data, build profiles, or anything like that. And we certainly don't share the data with anybody. So it's kind of an alternative approach to what advertisers and ad platforms do today. Today, what Nike would do is send all of their data to every ad platform that they work with, and that's used to build a profile of everything you do on the internet. And we're trying to find a way to sort of address that tracking and cross-site profiling problem using PETs that have been used in other industries for decades. So yeah, that's how we do what we do. In terms of customers, TikTok's been brave enough to allow us to talk about them as a customer, which we're very grateful for. We have partnerships with a number of other very sort of large networks out there, but we can't talk about that at this point. We're still early, moving through sort of the development phase with them, and then we work with dozens of advertisers all over the world. In Europe, it's actually one of our best markets because you actually have strong regulations in place. Thank you. In the United States, less so. But there are still some advertisers that are in like the healthcare space or the financial services space that are constrained. They can't share their data with ad platforms, but they can work with us because we never allow that data to go anywhere. And so that's the business.
There were earlier questions at the back that and also, yeah, I think best, and then we'll revisit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a very enlightening discussion. The word privacy washing came up, and I was wondering if we are perhaps a little bit naive when we talk about, for instance, the ATT framework as a pet. How would you respond to that?
I'll take it, sure. Yeah, I think, look, the details of what happens inside of ATT are fairly opaque. So, like, I don't know if they use differential privacy. I don't know if that differential privacy has settings that are reasonable, and so forth. So it's somewhat difficult to evaluate the privacy properties of ATT. I think it was a step in the right direction in some respects, in that at least it sort of brought to the forefront to consumers, to the earlier question, that they are being tracked and so forth. My biggest problem with ATT is the lack of enforcement. What has actually happened in reality is the industry has built quite a few workarounds to send exactly the same data that they used to send, using IDFA, the Apple identifier, through fingerprinting and other mechanisms, and that is now happening server to server through APIs. Consumers have absolutely no visibility into what's happening and no way to control it. So in a lot of ways, the lack of enforcement, and by the way, ATT does say explicitly that those things are not okay in the policy. So I think, unfortunately, what the net effect of it has been is giving consumers false confidence that they are being protected, when in reality, things have gotten materially worse from a privacy perspective as a result of it. So I don't believe that it has been successful in achieving the goal. And I think, frankly, going back to the competition thing, the reason that I suspect, and I don't know this, Apple has been reluctant to enforce is competition scrutiny. And so, finding a way for them to feel okay to actually constrain some of these practices, or frankly, regulation should do the job, that's a better approach.
I can complement a bit the answer. Well, maybe I wouldn't say that it is entirely countervailing of market realities, and you cannot call it a pet, or it's purely privacy washing. It still has an interest, as you said, in terms of privacy. This is not really of course, we assessed this point, and it was not really what was at stake when we look at this in our authority. The problem was more, if you want, the proportionality of this system with competition and the pure compliance. Clearly, the ATT goes above mere compliance to GDPR. This is very clear, and it goes in such a way that probably it's done in a way that it has more competitive drawbacks than a privacy interest. So to say it like that, whatever those interests are, and on top of this, there is a point in having the system applying to Apple ad tech systems as well as its competitors. It's another story. But so I would say it's not entirely privacy watching. It's more a question of what is the trade-off between competitive objectives and privacy objectives.
If I can add, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, add a little thing about this Apple ATT case. I mean, I use this case in my research as an example of Article 102 infringement. I think that it can be easily included into one of the exploitative theories. And thank you. And I do believe that when we do talk about the privacy, we mostly are focusing on the users, also outdoor market as well. But I see privacy as a more of a human thing. So I just wanted to add a little thing. So I actually see this as an infringement of more competition too, because obviously Apple is a big player on the market.
I would say that in an ideal world where there are legal incentive for pets, so that you are more compliant with the law, and economic incentives, so you get discounts, I don't know, on your taxes for R&D. Perhaps Apple see that through their platform that that advertiser use pets, for example, and there's no need, if everyone is more, let's say, privacy attentive, there's no need for the central platform, in this case being Google or Apple, to be the privacy gatekeeper to enhance privacy. So,
I think we have time for one final question, and this man in the front row has had his hand up a very long time. The last question. Thank you so much.
Very quick. This is Nick from AWO. And my question is, I don't know if it's the right question, but so Privacy Sandbox started with phasing out third-party cookies. Then it was a global consent kind of prompt, and now it's nothing. Would the phasing out of third-party cookies be good for pets? And is the fact that it's no longer happening bad for pets?
That's a great question. I believe it likely would have been helpful on balance. I think because it would further encourage the development of technologies that could be used as an alternative, and hopefully a more privacy-preserving alternative to the solution. But I think one of the things that, going back to the ATT issue, is there are two ways that the industry is going to go when it's constrained, right? It's like you squeeze a balloon, right, and it's going to pop out on one side or the other. One is going to be a privacy invasive workaround, and the other is it's going to adopt privacy preserving solutions. And so you can squeeze the balloon, but you have to sort of nudge it in the right direction. It may not get there on its own. And I think ATT is instructive, because my sense is it did not encourage the industry to adopt privacy preserving approaches for the most part. There are clearly some exceptions. But it did encourage more invasive practices. So I would say yes, reducing the role of cookies or eliminating the role of cookies is part of it, but we need regulation, enforcement of both platform policies, Apple and Google, to the degree that they're going to implement them, and existing and new regulation to constrain and push the market in the right direction.
Sharp 3:30, wow.
I think, yeah, we can wrap it up there unless.
I think they decided for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.